If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, broadcasting from Channels Television live from Lagos. A reminder of our main stories. President Goodluck Jonathan optimistic about ending insurgency in the northeast. Yorubas in Kwara and Kogi states allege marginalization demand their own state. Rainstorm renders hundreds of families homeless in Ozala community in Edo State, and lawyers to ousted Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi staged walkout in court, forcing the judge to adjourn hearing. All our top stories can be found on our website, ChannelsTV.com, and on YouTube.com/ChannelsWeb. To get us on the move, please visit m.channelstv.com to view us live on your mobile device. You can also download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS, and Windows phones from their respective stores. You can also now interact with the Channels Eyewitness feature on our Android and Windows 8 platforms. If you have pictures or videos to share with us, tap on the application on your device, swipe to reveal the Eyewitness menu, and follow the instructions to share your report, pictures, and your videos. Members of the Joint Task Force have reportedly forced their way into Obodo and Escravos in Warri Southwest local government area of Delta State, where hundreds of junior workers at the Chevron-operated Escravos gas-to-liquid project have been protesting for about a week. According to a source who spoke with Channels Television via telephone, several workers have been forcefully ejected from the tank farm by some military men who stormed the area, shooting and throwing tear gas around. Junior workers had shut down the facility in protest of being shortchanged and maltreated, with no leave allowance, no proper Medicare, and drastic reduction of their salaries from 650,000 naira to 150,000 naira. Visits by community leaders and elders to the community have not yielded results, as the protesters remain adamant, insisting that only dialogue with the management of Chevron Company. Meanwhile, all efforts to reach Chevron's group head, media, and media personnel, Mr. Deji Hastrop, have proved abortive, and they've not been responding to calls made to their phones. To politics now, election fever may just be in the air, following the release of the timetable for the next phase of the polls by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. It includes this year's governorship elections in Ekiti State on June the 21st, followed by the Osun State governorship poll on August the 9th. In this next report, our political correspondent, Charles Aruka, examines the implications of INEC's election timetable for the 2015 polls.
The general elections are slated for next year, beginning with the presidential and National Assembly polls on February the 14th, with the governorship and state assembly elections following 2 weeks later on the 28th. This time around, INEC's scheduling of the polls somewhat alters the sequence of the 2011 process, when the National Assembly elections held before the presidential election. This year's governorship elections in the two southwestern states of Ekiti and Osun are starting about 7 months after the rather controversial governorship poll in the southeastern state of Anambra in November last year. The question is whether it's enough time for INEC to have learned its lessons from the Anambra experience, where owing to a differential in ballots cancelled and those scored by the runner-up party, the election was declared inconclusive.
Total votes cast 429,549. The rules guarding this election is that for somebody to emerge or to be returned as winner, he has to first of all score majority votes. Secondly, he has to have the spread. He must score 25% in 2/3 of the local government.
Among the problems INEC has had to deal with is the late arrival of registration materials as well as the composition of its polling officials. There is also the issue of an updated voter register to contend with.
Yes, we are all aware. We are moving into the last lap of our work and preparations.
Although the INEC chairman, Professor Atahiru Jega, has asked Nigerians not to expect perfect elections in 2015, at least there should be some optimism if the mistakes of Anambra are not repeated in Ekiti and Osun. In addition to being a plus for the electoral umpire, it might just prove to be the impetus for Nigerian voters to approach the 2015 polls with more enthusiasm. Charles Aruka, for Channels Television News.
And now to look at the Anambra experience and the lessons to draw from it in the case of the governorship elections in Ekiti and Osun State. I'm now being joined in the news at 10 by Dr. Nick Idoko, a public affairs analyst. Dr. Idoko, thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you.
Now, we're aware that INEC's timetable for Osun and Ekiti states have just been released, but we still don't have a permanent voter card for the voters card. Do you see this affecting the process in these states?
Yes, of course. The INEC ought to get its acts together before the elections start. Number one is that it must update the voters register. Today we have in Ekiti we have 16 local governments, 177 registration areas, and then we have about 2,195 polling units. The INEC thinks that it's going to unfold what it calls the continuous registration of voters, but it has not unfolded that. In fact, it said it was going to unfold that last year. It has not unfolded that yet, which means the register has not been updated. And there is what we call voter verification. This is what INEC should do, put the voters register on display for voters to go and verify their registration status. By that, those who are 18, who have just turned 18, will have a chance to register. And those who are 18 plus, who didn't have the chance to register, will now be able to register. But it is through this verification of voters that the register can be updated. And it's only when the register is updated properly so that every voter can now be sure that he or she is enfranchised. And this is very, very important. It's at the core of democracy.
So now, do we have enough time for this to happen?
And we don't really have much time, actually. But I think INEC will come up with the program to do all this. And besides, INEC should actually embark on massive voter education, because many Nigerians are not aware of what to do during elections. And it is important for them to understand that they must first be registered before they can vote. So enfranchisement is at the point of registration. So if the voter register is truncated or tampered with or distorted, then a whole lot of people will be disenfranchised because they wouldn't be able to vote.
And that was the factor in the Anambra elections, this voter awareness creation, voter sensitization. How do you think that process can be harnessed to work in this case?
Yes, I was listening to Professor Jega the other day saying that, talking to EU delegation, that INEC does not have enough money to conduct voter education, that it requires funding, further funding, because the budget provision is not sufficient, according to him. But it is at the critical base of actually enlightening the citizenry that they should register, number one, be able to come out to vote, number two. Otherwise, they will not have the opportunity to choose the leaders and programs that can best address the problems they face. So it is at the core of democracy. So the issue of registration, the issue of voting are critical issues. But then people cannot take this opportunity unless they are aware. So sensitization, advocacy, enlightenment are very, very important. In fact, even those who are going to conduct the elections, the NYC contract staff, electoral officers of INEC must also be educated.
You raised an interesting point that the Professor Jega mentioned about inadequacy of funds. What does that say to the Nigerian people?
Well, the Nigerian people...
Their hands are tied.
The Nigerian people understand that to mean that if INEC is not properly funded, of course, you cannot organize a free and clean election for Nigerians. So, and that is another matter entirely. The government should be able to make adequate provisions because elections are very, very important. They are, in fact, without elections, we can't do much, in this country.
Now, let's go back to the Anambra elections. We're trying to see what could be learned from there. They had issues.
Yes.
Voter register issues, logistics issues. What do you think can be done in this case to avoid what happened then?
Yes, there were many problems in the Anambra State elections, particularly, as you said, logistics. But the more critical
one, arrival of ballot boxes,
yes, arrival of materials,
you couldn't find their names.
Yes, that's the one I'm going to talk about. The issue of registration and voters register is very, very critical. In fact, before the elections of November 16, 2013, in Anambra State, they have 21 local governments. You had about 1.7 million voters, said to be registered. But after elimination, because INEC adopted the system they call register optimization process, where they will now verify those who have registered multiple times. So they were so many people were eliminated from that voters register, and about 93,000 of such people. Now, that's not even the issue. By the time the voters register was on display, so many people, including candidates, could not find their names in the voters register. Somebody like the PDP candidate, Woye, and his entire family could not find their names in the voters register. So at that point, they were disenfranchised. They couldn't even vote because you must first register before you can vote. And this happened in so many areas. They don't mean not a crisis that happened. Had to do with the voters register. And I think somehow some people tampered with the voters register because these people are saying that when they last checked, their names were in the voters register. So how come? Who removed their names? So INEC must be very, very vigilant, about the voters register. And so in some cases, they say that about 2 voters registers were on display. One was different from the other. So I didn't know what happened. But I tell you something, Nigerian politicians are very smart. And if INEC is not vigilant enough, they will always tamper with the voters register. And once they do that, so many people will be disenfranchised.
Now, what do you recommend? Because in this case, prevention is always better than cure.
Yes.
Allegations of rigging or fraud can best be nipped in the bud beforehand, and one of such ways is complete clarity in the case of voters register.
Yes.
What's your recommendation going forward for Ekiti and Osun states for INEC to truly be seen as being above board?
Yes, the Anambra State election, let me start from there, was a very, very important election because Anambra State is also a very powerful state. And we had heavyweights who are contesting for this election. If you look at Governor Peter Obi, who had a candidate, or if you want, a surrogate, he broke the jinx of becoming the very first person to win the election in Anambra State, both old and new Anambra State. And you had Ngige on the other side, and then you had the Woyes, you had the Bars, and others. In fact, in all, there were 23 political parties cleared for the election in Anambra State. Now, in Osun State, Osun is not as big as although in Osun State you have 30 local governments, but in Ekiti you have 16. Then you have about 3,000 polling units in Osun and over 2,000 in...
Sorry to cut in, but what do you now recommend?
What I recommend is, one, INEC is at the center of all this because the umpire in every election in Nigeria, INEC must get its act together. Number one, it must update the voters register, embark on public education, voter education, civic education, sensitize Nigerians on what elections mean, the role of elections in a democracy and development, and be able to enfranchise a whole lot of Nigerians who must be vigilantly assertive of their rights to a free, clean, and honest election. But any meaningful election can only be achieved when the environment is conducive for that. And INEC is at the center of all this. If INEC does not prepare the voters register and make sure that people come out to vote, and at the same time protect their votes, then we're not going to have a clean election in Ekiti or in Osun State, even before the presidential election next year.
So all eyes are on INEC, as can be expected.
All eyes on INEC.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Idoko, for coming on the News at 10.
Yeah,
We're speaking with Dr. Nick Idoko, a public affairs analyst. When the News at 10 returns, wife of the president, Dame Patience Jonathan, denies being ill again. That's coming up in a moment. Please stay with us.